Giants star defensive lineman Dexter Lawrence has officially requested a trade, and Jim Harbaugh should absolutely get his brother on the phone to see if a deal can get done.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, we got to get into the draft, and the Chargers only have 5 draft picks. Could they actually address all of their needs in this draft alone? We got to talk about that, and we know that the Giants have a couple of really good defenders, but could the Chargers go after Kayvon Thibodeaux instead? But, of course, the big news of the day is Dexter Lawrence, and the Chargers are in prime position to make that deal happen.
If they want to get it done, they could get it done. And that is a big-time story, I think, for them right now. And I don't necessarily think it's likely that it happens, but there's not really a lot of reason to think that they shouldn't be interested in a star like Dexter Lawrence. For the Chargers, who have continued to kind of put minimal resources into the defense and kind of try to have their defensive coordinators get the most out of what they have, which they've done very well. If they could get a needle mover, right? That's what we talk about all the time. Can you get someone that moves the needle for you? Yeah, I mean, the buy or sell on this Buy or Sell Tuesday, David, getting into the biggest Charger storylines and overreactions is this. Buy or sell, the Chargers should be trying to trade for Dexter Lawrence, and we had several different everydayers that had that buy or sell today. And the answer is yes, and I'm buying it.
Absolutely, the answer is yes. Unequivocally, the answer is yes. The Chargers need to add a playmaker. They need to add a weapon to that side of the ball for their new defensive coordinator, Chris O'Leary. And, I don't know how it gets much better at this stage of the game than Dexter Lawrence, a guy who is a true difference maker in the interior, the middle of your defensive line, a guy who is a force multiplier on that side of the ball. He's played 16 games in 6 of his 7 seasons, has 15 passes defensed, 5 forced fumbles, 6 of his 7 seasons, over 30 pressures, 2 seasons, over 60 pressures on the interior. That is big time damage as a pass rusher. And yeah, he had a down year last year, but he's only 1 season removed from a 9-sack, 34 pressure season on the interior. You insert Dexter Lawrence on a defensive line that has Teair Tart, that has Jamari Caldwell on it, that has some fantastic edge rushers like Tuli, Tuipulotu, and Khalil Mack. That right there is a defensive line that is ferocious and would be very, very scary.
Yeah, I agree with all that. And I think the big thing here, for Chargers fans to kind of try to wrap their brain around is it's obviously not the number one glaring issue that you have to fill, which is the edge rusher position right now on the defensive side of things, right? And he doesn't play that position. He has someone, though, that kind of helps the rest of the guys that you have out there, though. And I think that would be the biggest argument for him. And I think, obviously, it's hard not to get caught up in a guy who had only half a sack last year and easy to forget that he had 9 in 2024, but also 198 pressures over the last 4 seasons in the regular seasons, averaging almost 50 per year over the last 4, 5 straight of 34 or more pressures. That is something that you want, especially for someone who's still only 28 years old. It's not like this is a 31-year-old that you still have under contract. But then I think it just begs the question, what would it cost? This is here from Jordan Renan, who asked around the league, and the general consensus appears to be that if the Giants were willing to trade Dexter Lawrence, their return would be in the range of a late first-round pick to second-rounder. That's a pretty surprising, amount to put out there for someone of his caliber, for sure. But I know me and you, we're talking about it before. Yeah, I would absolutely send the 22nd overall pick for Dexter Lawrence and not even have a second thought about it. I mean, there's no chance that you're going to sniff in this draft at 22 the kind of impact that this guy can make for you this year. If that is really what it costs, and I'm suspicious, if that is actually what it will end up being. But I would say, yeah, if that's what it is, I'm sending it yesterday.
Yeah, you're looking at me dead in the face, and you're telling me that it's only going to take the 22nd overall pick to get Dexter Lawrence? Ha! Absolutely. There's like you couldn't stop me from making that phone call so fast. Like I would make it so fast your head would spin, as my beautiful mother likes to say. That's the type of move that would move the needle, that would change things on that side of the ball. And there's just no way for me to think that there's going to be any player in the draft that would come anywhere close to making the type of impact that he would make on this Chargers football team. At 22 overall, you're in such a weird spot in the draft. You're in such a, an interesting spot where you just don't know if you're going to have even a first round qualified player available at that position. So I just think for me, like the Chargers have been hoarding their cap space. Even right now, they have about $48 million in cap space. And obviously some of that is set aside for draft picks and for in-season moves, but they still have plenty of operating cash to be able to accommodate Dexter Lawrence's contract, which, is somewhere in the $19 to $20 million range the next 2 seasons. And, obviously the big reason why he is asking for this trade is because he wants a new contract. He wants to be paid amongst the top interior defensive linemen in the league, which, hard to say that he doesn't agree or doesn't deserve that type of extension. So the Chargers have the cap space not only this year, but also next year to be able to make that trade and accommodate that contract.
That is a big part of the puzzle, right? Is can you actually, take on what his contract is over the next 2 seasons, because he's under contract through 2027, and that is, according to Spot Track, 2026 you paying him $20 million, 2027 $19.5 million for that player. Yeah, you do that every day of the week. Now, depending on what it costs, obviously that could change things a little bit, and that might be why the asking price is what it is, because the reason he wants to leave is money related, and it might be because he wants to get paid $30+ million per season, right? Right now he was at the APY of $22.5 million. He's 10th in the NFL at his position. So obviously for a guy who's been a second team All-Pro multiple times, he feels like he should get more. I don't know how much, or how long I'm making that deal if that's the case, but I'd be still willing to trade the first round pick for 2 years to figure it out, right? And have him on the roster. So I think that as far as the cost goes, if that's really what it is, I'd be willing to pay it. Me and you have toyed around with the other Locked On hosts about, potentially, hey, maybe it's a little bit more. Maybe it's something in the 2027 draft class. They could swing something there. They're obviously going to have a compensatory pick, either a 3rd or 4th round pick for Odafe Oweh. But yeah, last year we saw Quentin Williams go for a 1 and a 2, right? So thinking it's just going to be a late first round pick might be a little bit hard to believe, but let's just say what it is. If the Chargers trade for Dexter Lawrence, he would be the best interior defensive lineman that they've had in 20 plus years. And it's 20 plus because I don't even know, because obviously the last one you think about is Jamal Williams. This is a different kind of player than Jamal Williams was, right? Jamal Williams in his heyday was more valuable because of the way the league was run and how often teams actually did run the football.
A lot. Yeah.
He these days probably wouldn't be as valuable as someone who didn't create a ton of pass rush and, didn't have a ton of sacks in his career. Dexter Lawrence has that. He has pure pocket push. He has, a 9-sack season only 2 seasons ago. We've seen, top end production, and that is what this Chargers defensive line needs. They need some pass rush juice. You have him and Dalvin Tomlinson and Tier Tart, and you're not going to run on that team, not up the middle at least, right? But Justin Eboigbe is the only guy right now you feel like, okay, he just come off a 6-sack season. He definitely can still bring you some juice, but I think that, you give this defensive line and add in Dexter Lawrence and give that to Mike Elston, look out.
It very well could be the most dominant defensive line we have ever seen. And I'm talking about me and Daniel, as far as as long as we have covered the Chargers. I don't know if you could point to another defensive line that who would have been as dominant or as versatile or as multiple as that defensive line featuring Dexter Lawrence would be. That would be an absolute reckoning for other teams to have to deal with.
Well, let's think about it, right? What have the teams had in common in these Super Bowl championship runs? The last couple of years, monsters on the defensive line. You got last year, the guys like Byron Murphy and the big cat Leonard Williams on the Seattle line. Before that, you have the Eagles who have Jordan Davis, and they also have Jalen Carter. Before that, a couple with the Chiefs where obviously maybe not the deepest, but you had the best guy at his position doing it in Chris Jones, who just absolutely wrecked those games once they got into the Super Bowl. So trying to build your defensive line like that has proven to work for some of these other teams. And I think the depth that they would have there with a pick like this, it just makes all the rest of those better. Without Dexter Lawrence, it's like, okay, you can get by with that. Like, that could be a good defensive line. With him, I think it takes him to a completely different level. But maybe the Chargers could target another giant instead, call up Jim Harbaugh, say, hey, what about that Kayvon Thibodeaux guy? We're getting into that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Financial stress is something a lot of people are carrying right now, and it's not just about numbers. It can affect your sleep, your relationships, and your overall mental health in ways that build up over time. And the reality is, struggling with money doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it just means you haven't had the right kind of support. It's something I've thought about, how easy it is to put pressure on yourself financially without really talking about it. And I think that is something with therapy that you can feel kind of the stress come off of yourself physically when you can actually kind of unburden some of this and have these talks instead of just trying to kind of pretend like it's not there, ignoring it, or just kind of blaming yourself for it. It's so easy to do that. BetterHelp helps with that kind of thing. And the stress that comes from trying to figure out everything on your own can be a lot. And the expectations to have everything together all the time is unrealistic. But therapy isn't about financial advice. It's about working through the stress and the anxiety and the emotions that come with it. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 6 million people served, BetterHelp makes it easier to get matched and start focusing on what you need. When life feels overwhelming, therapy can help. Sign up and get 10% off at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's betterhelp.com/lockedon. David, we talked about the biggest giant on the market, but we haven't talked about another one that has been linked to the Chargers in the past, at least by us, as a potential trade, and might be eerily similar to what they did last year with Odafe Oweh mid-season to give a boost to their pass rush. And that's a buy or sell that we have here from Hunter Miller, who says, buy or sell, there is real potential that the Chargers could trade for edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeaux. David, we know that Jim and John now have that connection now from LA to New York instead of to Baltimore. And the Chargers do need a third edge rusher. Is that something you think can make sense?
I mean, it definitely makes sense from a player standpoint. I mean, he's only 24 years old. He has crazy. A fifth-year option. He's coming off of a not so great year, right? So if you want to try to buy low on somebody who still has a lot of potential and does have an 11.5 sack, 43 pressure season under his belt in 2023, then seems like a quality player. And it seems very, very similar to Odafe Oweh, where, there's good football in there. There's ability there. That this guy brings some tools to the table that absolutely, works in the NFL and, would fit in not only right now, but potentially for the future of that edge rusher position opposite of Tuipulotu. So if there's a way that you can make that deal happen, maybe not now, but maybe a little bit later on, then yeah, it definitely makes sense. It kind of reminds me of Padres general manager AJ Preller. Whenever he has a feeling about a player, no matter how long it takes, he will make that deal happen. And eventually he usually does. So I think, if the Chargers are in on him, then maybe they have to be patient, wait for the right opportunity, and strike when the opportunity arises.
I did not have David somehow linking that to the Padres, but unfortunately for AJ Preller, not all of those deals work out, but I think you can obviously aspire to see Joe Ortiz maybe get more aggressive in that nature. But I think that for the Chargers and Kayvon Thibodeaux, the biggest thing here is that they just used the number 1 overall pick on an edge rusher and Abdul Carter, right? So you already have their top pick last year for Abdul Carter. And then you also have Brian Burns, who had 16 plus sacks last year, right? So like your investments in that position group are huge already. And yes, John Harbaugh is in town. And yes, Denard Wilson is going to be running something out of that Mike McDonald tree, which we know they like to have 3 edge rushers, right? But at this end of the day, it's hard to imagine Kayvon Thibodeaux is in the future plans for the Giants, which gives you the opportunity, right? And another guy where it's like, hey, what you spend on him might be coming back to you, right? If he comes in and has a big season, you could be getting some of that back like you did with Odafe Oweh and have that potentially come back to you, in a compensatory pick. But 32 pressures in only 10 games last season is a pretty good number, right? Averaging 3.2 pressures per game. had 4 or more pressures in 5 of the 10 games that he played in. Biggest problem was an over 25% missed tackle rate over the last 2 years. So, again, you're willing to buy low and bet on the Chargers to get more out of them because we've seen them do it in the past. And right now they're in a very similar situation where, they had Joey Bosa 2 years ago under Jesse Minter. Last year they had to trade for Odafe to get that legitimate third rusher. Right now they're sitting in that same spot. So depending on how the draft goes, right, or how it's going, maybe they find a way to flip a pick with Jim's brother, John. But there is that connection there now. Will we see the Bros have a trade in 2026?
Hey, fellas. Kirk in Eagle, Nebraska. Hey, buy or sell. The Harbaugh brothers will make a trade before or on the day of the draft. All right. Thanks, man. Bye.
That's a good one. I think we will see a trade. I'm not sure if it's going to happen before this year's draft because obviously it's coming up quickly. We're less than 20 days away from it. But I do think that is an avenue that is now open for, the Chargers to have a little bit more access to those players on the Giants because you can say whoever is in charge and Joe Shane might be the GM there, but I do think that John Harbaugh is the one wearing the pants in the family.
You better believe it. It's the same thing that happened in Los Angeles. Jim Harbaugh absolutely is making a lot of these decisions, whether you want to believe it or not. He basically said as much in his introductory press conference, and what we've heard from him. You just, obviously you hear about the Batman and Robin and all that. I don't believe that. I don't believe any of that. I feel like he's definitely making a lot of those decisions. And these brothers have made deals before. Back in 2013, they made a deal over Anquan Boldin where he went from the Ravens to the 49ers. And then obviously last year when they traded Alohi Gilman and a 5th-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens in exchange for Odafe. So they have made deals before. Obviously, that they're communicating and talking. So I do feel like this is something that very well could happen. And I would not be surprised during the tenure of each of these coaches that we won't see a trade or two.
Yeah, not just that, right? I mean, they traded coaches as well. Mike McDonald going from Baltimore to Michigan to be their defensive coordinator, right? Same thing with Jesse Minter going from Baltimore to Michigan. And then now, obviously, the Chargers and the Ravens, obviously, in this scenario, Jesse Minter going back to Baltimore. But it is a little different, right? Because Joe Hortiz, the one kind of added layer there was the fact that he is, very good friends and very, very close with Eric DaCosta, who's the Ravens GM. So I don't know his relationship with Joe Shane, but you think at least Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh's relationship is enough to kind of open that door. And if they can find something that's mutually beneficial for teams who, in my opinion, are on different timelines right now.
Oh, definitely.
I think there's definitely, some moves to be done if it works out because the Chargers still have some needs to fill. But let's get to one more here from 619 Shaggy who says, buy or sell, Derwin James gets extended before Tuipulotu. David, are you buying that?
Yeah, Derwin James coming off of another consecutive second-team All-Pro nomination, which he's fantastic, and he's in the last year of a 4-year, $76 million deal that's averaging $18 million per season. The thing is they know exactly who Derwin James is and what he brings to the table. There's no debate about it. Everybody knows basically, with respect to his skills, what he's going to do and how he's going to impact the game. There are people out there that are not 100% sold on Tuipulotu and if he's going to be able to replicate the level of success that he had last year. Derwin James is one of the best defensive players in the NFL, period. You know exactly what he is and what he does. Tuipulotu could benefit from doing that and replicating that level of success one more time. So with that being said, I am going to buy that Derwin James is going to get his extension before Tuipulotu.
Yeah, I mean, the timeline's tough, obviously, because at the end of the day, I think both of them end up getting an extension for this team. For sure. And I think it's more important that the Chargers get the deal done with Tuli because you have a potential bigger need there with Khalil Mack retiring after every season at this point, right, coming into play. And also the fact that he plays a more valuable position. That is easily the more important deal to get done for as much as I like Derwin James. You at least have an R.J. Mickens and an Elijah Molden in the folded safety. If you lose Tuli and Khalil Mack after this season, depending on what happens in the draft, what is left, right? So, that's a deal that has to get done. But Tuli could be asking for a more unreasonable amount because he's younger, because he's coming off of such an electric season Now, if Derwin is coming off like an 8-pick season with 5 sacks. Like, it might be like, okay, well, we might have to wait and see if that simmers down a little bit. But I do think it is about, like, with Derwin, you know what you're getting, but you don't know when it's going to drop off. And with Tuli, you know he could still get better, but you haven't actually seen it. And, to give him that, $30 to $35 million contract. So I think they both get done. I don't know if, like, which one happens first. Like, obviously, it gets serious if one of them gets extended before the season and one of them doesn't, because that means at the end of next season, you're potentially having one of them go and be able to test the market, and both of them play such incredibly large roles in this defense. It's hard for me to see the Chargers wanting either of those guys to walk. But we still have more to get into, including the draft with only 5 picks. Can the Chargers actually fill all of their needs in the 2026 NFL draft? We're getting into all that and more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. We still have some great buy or sells to get into here, David, and thank you to all the everydayers for making these shows possible and letting us know what you guys want to hear about that. We appreciate it. And to make sure you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow free the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And also, make sure you guys are always checking out later in the afternoon for the bonus shows that we have coming out. We're trying to do at least 3 a week for you guys right now, and we're going to keep ramping it up as we get closer and closer to the draft, including the Chargers meeting with Caleb Lomu. Why are we seeing them check on an offensive tackle that is likely a first-round pick? You're going to have to wait on that answer. But we still have more great buy or sells to get into, including this one that we have here. Buy or sell, the Chargers can fill all of their needs in the draft. It sounds very simple, David, but I think the answer is much more complicated.
It is very, very complicated. I think when you look at the top of the needs for the Chargers, it's you got to get a starting guard, and you have to get another edge rusher, and you have to do that early. I think beyond that, there's several other ancillary needs that need to be addressed as well. You could probably add another corner. You could add another linebacker. You could add another center, where they don't really have a backup center at this point in time. So, I mean, that's 4 or 5 positions right there. You only got 5 picks in the NFL draft this year in 2026. And for as phenomenal as Joe Ortiz has done in both of his first 2 drafts, expecting him to be able to hit on 4 out of the 5 of his picks again for a 3rd consecutive season seems to be far-fetched to me. It just seems very unrealistic to expect for him to be able to hit it out of the park again and again and again. Eventually, you're going to make some picks, and they're not going to work out. So that's why you want to get more swings at the bat. And unfortunately for the Chargers, they don't have very many. So it's very important that they make the ones that they do have count.
Yeah, I mean, I'm selling it. I don't think they can fill all their needs. I think they can fill their biggest needs in the draft, right? But they're not going to be able to fill all their needs because they arguably just have too many needs, depending on kind of how much you think that they need guys at certain positions. But obviously, edge and guard are no question. Nobody's going to argue that. You also have needs at cornerback, right? You lost Benjamin St-Juste to that rotation to 4, and I think there's obviously questions about the top end of that room, right? Or if you could just add an ace to that room, what that does to it. Right now, you have 1 center on the roster, really, right, with NFL experience. Tight end, you still need another one, unarguably. You have 2, right? You need a tight end. And then I think the more arguable ones are linebacker, because it's like you'd be fine at linebacker if you don't add one, right? But long term, that changes for sure. Wide receiver, right? You could argue you have a need there. Interior defensive line, we're talking about trading Dexter Lawrence. Obviously, you have some sort of need there. Offensive tackle, right? You could say is a need too, maybe later on. But the point is, you don't have enough picks to fill all of those or build the depth at all of those positions. The other part of it is, to your point, you're not going to hit on every guy. And it might not even be that, but like some guys need time to develop, right? Like you would have said Kamani Vidal was a bust after year 1, right? If that was all you had to go off of. You would have said the same thing about Justin Aboigbe, and that he might get cut after year 1. And look where those guys are now. But to think it's going to all happen for you in 2026 was part of the reason we wish they were more urgent during free agency. In reality, the other holes are going to have to be filled in free agency after the draft. They're going to have to be filled on the waiver wire, potentially with in-season trades. And the other improvements are going to have to come from guys you're not expecting, right? Like, that's just what it is. It's going to have to be the improvement of the players that are already on the roster, like a Junior Colson maybe. Maybe it's Kyle Kennard. Maybe it's a Marlo Wax. Maybe it's a Nico Reed, right? Or an Eric Rodgers. But, like, that is how it has to come together. Like, you need a little bit of both. Like, you can't have everyone stay status quo and only get better from the additions that you make. The players on your team have to get better too, and the Chargers are going to be relying heavily on their coaching staff for that to come to fruition. But let's get to this here from Sayal55, who says, buy or sell a QB needy team will trade back into the first round at the Chargers spot to draft Ty Simpson. Ty Simpson, a polarizing quarterback who may be a first-round pick, may not be a first-round pick, depending on who you ask and kind of what you value. But I will say, though, David, like sometimes, with quarterbacks, it's not really about whether or not that they're a first-round pick or not, and more about how desperate a team is to, figure out if they could be their next starting quarterback.
For sure. And I think, obviously, you want to take a look at what teams could possibly need a quarterback next year, and the Raiders, we already know they're going to take Mendoza, so I don't even really include them in this. Then you have the Jets, you got the Cardinals, the Steelers, and the Dolphins. And I think, to me,
the Browns at 24 are another one, right? The Browns pick at 24. If you were another team like the Jets, thinking the Browns could take another quarterback, because right now they just have Shador, right?
Yeah.
That I think that's probably the most likely, hey, why would you need to leapfrog all the way up to 22, right? I think that's the only one that really makes sense.
No, for sure. And I think the wild card here with this one is the Steelers, right? Because the Steelers is one of those teams that could need a quarter or could look to take a quarterback, and they pick at 21. I think the teams, if they don't take a quarterback, the Steelers, I think the teams to pay attention to besides the Browns is the Jets have the first pick of the second round, and the Cardinals have the second pick of the second round. So maybe, if Ty Simpson's still there, right, and they want to pull the trigger, then maybe the Chargers move back to one of those positions to be able to pick up an extra pick and, to be able to get more swings at the bat while allowing one of those QB needy teams to make a deal to go get their quarterback.
Yeah, I think the other wild card is the Dolphins, who pick at 30 now because of the trade that they made for Jalen Waddle. They're another one where maybe they feel like they have. But the thing is like, if the Browns aren't taking someone, right, like, then, they would basically be trying to move up just so somebody doesn't move ahead of them, right? It would basically be that, because you're going from 30 all the way to 22. I'm going to say there's a great chance that I'll be down, for that. Yeah. We did some locked on mocks today, and like, that's what's killed the Chargers. That will kill them this year. And what killed them last year is just the fact that they're not good quarterback drafts, man. Like, if you're a team with a quarterback like the Chargers, you want loaded potential quarterback classes every single
4 or
year.
5.
I mean, the reason you landed Joe Alt was because there was Caleb Williams, Jalen Williams, right, and also Drake May. That's why the Joe Alt gets down to you at 5, because there's 3 quarterbacks going in the top 3.
For sure.
Last year, it's just Cam Ward, right, that goes 1. That doesn't help you. No other quarterback gets selected before the Chargers end up picking at 22 last year. This year, it could be the same. So hopefully someone falls in love with Ty Simpson. Hopefully Dan Orlovsky can, get in the ear of some of these NFL GMs and tell them that he's actually better than Fernando Mendoza, which is what he was saying out there. So if he could do that, that'd be great. But the more quarterbacks that go in front of the Chargers, the better. If the Chargers can be a pawn in the game of, somebody getting paranoid and thinking they have to move up to 22,
by all means,
Ty Simpson, open up the checkbook, because since you want a quarterback, I'm going to need to charge a little bit more as well.
Quarterback tax. That's the way it works.
Let's get to one more here before we get out from Athir, who says, buy or sell, the Chargers must sacrifice some 2027 draft picks if they are serious about winning the Super Bowl this year. David, what do you think?
If I was more convinced that the Chargers were closer to 1 pick away, then I would be more inclined with them mortgaging future assets to try to make that happen, to secure that player that will then make me feel like they're in contention to win a Super Bowl. The simple fact is they're not 1 player away. And also, the 2027 draft class is supposed to be historic in the talent that's available. And so I don't know how eager anybody is going to be at trying to trade away future assets to try to limit their options in a potentially talent-rich pool.
Yeah, and it's a good thing. Like, this is the thing. Like, I'm sure, like, the 2027 class is going to have some really good players, right? Like, there's guys like Jeremiah Smith who you've just been waiting on and could have played after their true freshman seasons, right?
Yeah, that dude's a freak.
A lot of it is going to be based on what quarterbacks they think are coming out, because at the end of the day, it's top-heavy, and teams are going to base drafts based on how good the quarterbacks are they think that are coming out. a lot can change in a year, right?
Sure.
This could be a great draft class, and we might feel totally different about it by the time it comes around next year. The other thing is, too, is just that the Chargers and where they're picking could change dramatically in 2027.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you're making a trade that makes you substantially better, now you're not having a top, 18 draft pick. You're having a bottom 4 in the first round draft pick. So like that's another thing. If you think you're there and it's going to take, well, and that's the other thing too. It's like, are we talking about 2027 first round pick? We're talking about a 2027 seventh round pick, right?
Right.
Like,
yeah, it's much different.
I'm 100% willing to, move some 2027 draft picks around if it can help you this year, right? But now, I'm also only doing that, though, if I think these are players that can get me closer to making a deep playoff run, because that's what's necessitated by the way the last 2 seasons have ended. You need to win now. And I'm not holding out hope for a great draft class in 2027 if it's going to cost me potentially making the playoffs or winning a playoff game in 2026. There has to be some win now. It has to be the right move, right? And it has to make you, Dexter Lawrence better, right? Yeah. It has to make you A.J. Brown better, right? It has to be a player that's going to move the needle if I'm going to do it. But yeah, I'm absolutely not just going to, clutch my pearls and hope 2027 is great, because the Chargers need to win in 2026, period. And that's where I'm at with it right now. But that's going to wrap things up for today's show. Make sure you guys are always around for the bonus shows as well. To make sure you don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. And thank you to all the everydayers who contributed to today's buy or sell show by hitting us up at Locked On LAC on Twitter, at Locked On Chargers on Instagram, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page as well, or calling into the voicemail at 323-524-7924 and leaving your 30-second Chargers question or buy or sell. Nothing but more draft coverage coming up for you guys, including tomorrow when we're going to get into our first 3-round mock draft of the offseason. It's full go. It's draft time, and we're watching a ton of prospects. So, the bags under eyes might get bigger, but so will our draft coverage as well. So that's how we'll be working. But we'll be back with you guys then. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.